I'm Dr. Laurie Rush, U.S. Army archaeologist here at Fort Drum, New York. And today we're standing on an enormous sand dune that's located just north of the Great Bend of the Black River. And it's locally known as the Hogsback. And this has been a really important place ever since the ice began to melt and the water began to disappear from our region 13,000 years ago. And in fact, this Hogsback probably would have been one of the pieces of land that would have been the first to emerge from those glacial lakes and the water all around. We even have a chert knife with a flute similar to our Clovis point, which was found at the very top of this Hogsback, which tells us that the people were here as soon as the ice melted and the water began to drain away. We really hope that all of you, as you begin to learn more about the indigenous people of New York, will go to the websites of our partner nations, the Oneida Indian Nation, the Onondaga Nation, and the St. Regis Mohawk Tribe. And on those websites, you will find really beautiful tellings of their creation stories. And when we think about the creation stories and the stories that the ancestors have handed on to our indigenous friends, we begin to learn that the ancestors were sharing their accounts of these ancient memories. And the Hogsback is a wonderful place to think about that, because we know that the ancient people talk about Sky Woman coming to the earth and there being water everywhere, and the recognition that there might not be enough land. And the animals come to help Sky Woman, and they send animals diving into the water, going very, very down deep to bring back a bit of earth. And the earth is placed on the turtle's back. And I like thinking about the possibility, because when we look at the map and we look down across to the Tug Hill, we realize that it's shaped like a turtle. And I can't help but wonder if the ancestors actually could begin to see from these high points, as the water is draining away, that the land really is emerging, and it really looks like a turtle's back. And we're so fortunate that they were able to share this history and their memories of the water disappearing, and all the way down to their children's children's children, who have been able to share with all of us today. The people continued to come to our area and continue to live and work here with all of us. But one group that as archaeologists we've been very interested in is the people who appear to have come from the American Midwest about 2,000 years ago. We can see, as we're along those shores of the Black River, that they would have been following the amazing runs of fish. When we think about fish like salmon and the big fisheries of the American West, we sometimes forget that we had a fishery that was just as plentiful right here on the shores of Lake Ontario and running up our tributaries. And so if you would have been here when the salmon were running and the steelhead were running, you would have been able to collect enormous quantities of fish. And these people had ceramic technology, and so we know about them because they left behind pieces of their pottery. They left behind the markers of their fish drying racks. We think they may have boiled and rendered the fish into oil, which they could have kept in their pots, so that they would be able to have the fish as a resource all year long, not only when the fish were running. They also left behind their stone tools. And so here's an example of a projectile point that would have been associated with those fishing people 2,000 years ago. We also have fishing people who came north following the waterways from Pennsylvania, and in fact on the other side of the Black River from here, they left behind an entire fishing campsite, not only with the spears for spearing fish out of the water, but also the scrapers for cleaning the fish and everything they would need to go from a successful fishing expedition to cleaning the fish and having it ready for either dining or for preservation. So this is a really important place and has been for thousands of years. When the Black River flowed into Glacial Lake Iroquois and it slowed down and it was carrying all the sand, it dumped hundreds of feet of sand on what we now call the Pine Plains Delta and created this very special sandy landform, and it's the reason that Fort Drum is here today. Our first important military installation in northern New York was Madison Barracks, located at Sackett's Harbor. But as military weapons improved and weapons like the machine gun were invented, the Army realized they needed a lot more room for military training, and there wasn't any land available in Sackett's Harbor. So the Department of the Army came to the Watertown Chamber of Commerce and they said, is there any place in your region that might be a good place with lots of space to train soldiers? And the Watertown Chamber of Commerce said, we have the perfect place. It's the Pine Plains, and it's only good for growing huckleberries. And so the cavalry came in 1907 and had their first training exercise, and it was very successful. So the Army began to buy the land here on the Pine Plains Delta in 1908, and the cavalry continued to come, and the Army has been training here at Fort Drum ever since. The Hogsback continues to be important because General Frederick Dent Grant, who actually was the son of Ulysses S. Grant and was born when his father Ulysses S. Grant was stationed at Sackett's Harbor, came, and his tent was actually on top of this Hogsback, as were the other officer tents, and they were tracked all the way along the ridge here, and they could literally look down on all the other cavalry tents that were stationed across the Pine Plains landscape. And so this ended up being an ideal place for Fort Drum, and across from us is now the airfield, and of course we have expanded, as all of our region now knows, not just in 1940, but then we built further on our land to expand to become the home of the 10th Mountain Division in the 1980s. And so again, we can begin to better understand our history by understanding our landscape and understanding the story of the land and the rocks and the sand and the soil to help us realize why we are here today, why Fort Drum is here today, and our role in taking care of the land for the future and our children.